Hello again, and welcome back to year 5 of the Religious Education Initiative. This is week 19, and we're doing day 1, so Happy New Year. For the last couple weeks, we have been pausing our progress through the book of Leviticus to observe the celebration of Christmas and then to begin the second third of year 5 with a selection from the book of Proverbs. This week, we will jump slightly ahead in the book of Leviticus to see what sort of animals are permitted to be used for offerings and for eating by the people of God. This distinction between animals that are to be eaten and animals that are to be avoided is not fundamentally one of what is righteous and what is evil, what is good and what is bad, but rather of restraint and separation. God's people are to be set apart from the rest of the people of the earth, not because they are better than them, but because their role is to be a priestly people, ministers of the presence of God to all the nations and peoples of the world. And for this priestly role, this priesthood, God calls them to be set apart in this way and in others. So this is from chapter 11 in Leviticus. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying to them, Speak to the people of Israel, saying, From among all the land animals, these are the creatures that you may eat. Any animal that has divided hoofs and is cleft-footed and chews the cud, such you may eat. But among those that chew the cud or have divided hoofs, you shall not eat the following: the camel, for even though it chews the cud, it does not have divided hoofs, it is unclean for you. The rock badger, for even though it chews the cud, it does not have divided hoofs, it is unclean for you. The hare, for even though it chews the cud, it does not have divided hoofs, it is unclean for you. The pig, for even though it has divided hoofs and is cleft-footed, it does not chew the cud, it is unclean for you. Of their flesh you shall not eat, and their carcasses you shall not touch, they are unclean for you. These you may eat of all that are in the waters, everything in the waters that has fins and scales, whether in the seas or in the streams, such you may eat. But anything in the seas or the streams that does not have fins and scales, of the swarming creatures in the waters, and among all the other living creatures that are in the waters, they are detestable to you, and detestable they shall remain. Of their flesh you shall not eat, and their carcasses you shall regard as detestable. Everything in the waters that does not have fins and scales is detestable to you. These you shall regard as detestable among the birds. They shall not be eaten. They are an abomination. The eagle, the vulture, the osprey, the buzzard, the kite of any kind, every raven of any kind, the ostrich, the nighthawk, the seagull, the hawk of any kind, the little owl, the cormorant, the great owl, the water hen, the desert owl, the carrion vulture, the stork, the heron of any kind, the hoopoe, and the bat. All winged insects that walk upon all fours are detestable to you. But among the winged insects that walk on all fours you may eat those that have jointed legs above their feet with which to leap on the ground. Of them you may eat the locust according to its kind, the bald locust according to its kind, the cricket according to its kind, and the grasshopper according to its kind. But all other winged insects that have 4 feet are detestable to you. By these you shall become unclean. Whoever touches the carcass of any of them shall be unclean until the evening. And whoever carries any part of the carcass of any of them shall wash his clothes and be unclean until the evening. Every animal that has divided hoofs but is not cleft-footed or does not chew the cud is unclean for you. Every one who touches one of them shall be unclean. All that walk on their paws among the animals that walk on all fours are unclean for you. Whoever touches the carcass of any of them shall be unclean until the evening. And the one who carries the carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean until the evening. They are unclean for you. These are unclean for you among the creatures that swarm upon the earth: the weasel, the mouse, the great lizard according to its kind, the gecko, the land crocodile, the lizard, the sand lizard, and the chameleon. These are unclean for you among all that swarm. Whoever touches one of them when they are dead shall be unclean until the evening. And anything upon which any of them falls when they are dead shall be unclean. Whether an article of wood or cloth or skin or sacking, any article that is used for any purpose, it shall be dipped into water, and it shall be unclean until the evening, and then it shall be clean. And if any of them falls into any earthen vessel, all that is in it shall be unclean, and you shall break the vessel. Any food that could be eaten shall be unclean, if water from any such vessel comes upon it. And any liquid that could be drunk shall be unclean, if it was in any such vessel. Everything on which any part of the carcass falls shall be unclean. Whether an oven or stove, it shall be broken in pieces. They are unclean, and shall remain unclean for you. But a spring or a cistern holding water shall be clean, while whatever touches the carcass in it shall be unclean. If any part of their carcass falls upon any seed set aside for sowing, it is clean. But if water is put on the seed, and any part of their carcass falls on it, it is unclean for you. If an animal of which you may eat dies, anyone who touches its carcass shall be unclean until the evening. Those who eat of its carcass shall wash their clothes and be unclean until the evening. And those who carry the carcass shall wash their clothes and be unclean until the evening. All creatures that swarm upon the earth are detestable. They shall not be eaten. Whatever moves on its belly, and whatever moves on all fours, or whatever has many feet, all the creatures that swarm upon the earth you shall not eat, for they are detestable. You shall not make yourselves detestable with any creature that swarms. You shall not defile yourselves with them, and so become unclean. For I am the Lord your God. Sanctify yourselves, therefore, and be holy, for I am holy. You shall not defile yourselves with any swarming creature that moves on the earth. For I am the Lord who brought you up from the land of Egypt to be your God. You shall be holy, for I am holy. This is the law pertaining to land, animal, and bird, and every living creature that moves through the waters, and every creature that swarms upon the earth, to make a distinction between the unclean and the clean, and between the living creature that may be eaten, and the living creature that may not be eaten. Okay. So, this is all very strange to us, not least because these are observances, these are rules that we do not keep any longer within the church. Although there are many elements of these that are simply good hygiene. If a dead lizard is found in a cooking container, we're not going to eat anything out of that cooking container. We recognize that disease follows, especially because these are the sorts of creatures that eat dead things and carry sicknesses. So there's an element of this that is simply good hygiene, but we cannot say that all of this is a matter of hygiene. Asking why it is that God sets the boundary between clean and unclean, why one type of animal is designated as clean and the other unclean, this is not necessarily the right question to ask. Again, we can discern in some cases a reason or a meaning, a significance. Again, especially a matter of hygiene. But fundamentally, this is not a matter, as we said at the beginning, of what is good and what is bad, or even what is holy and what is unholy. Although it uses those terms at the end. You are holy, he says. But he doesn't say that these things are unholy. He says, you are holy, for I, God says, for I am holy. So you shall be holy, which means they must be set apart. So we could go so far as to say that this is an arbitrary distinction. I'm not going to do so because there is a significance that we see in different places here. But even if it were simply an arbitrary distinction, then that makes actually still a fair bit of sense, because this is a rule that is setting the nation of Israel apart from all the other nations. It is something that they observe and no one else observes. It is an unnecessary, we could say, distinction that differentiates them from everyone else. And that's important because they are called to be a priestly people. They have a role as ministering the presence of God, as being the vessel of his presence in the world. And that being the case, they must be holy. They must be set apart, and this is the way in which they are set apart. Now, There's certainly more that could be said about this, and there are interesting notes, not least that some of the things that are explicitly stated as being unclean, things that don't have fins and scales in the waters. Well, these are the things that are acceptable to eat during fasting periods. So there are some points where the church's guidelines seem almost exactly flipped from the Old Testament. There are reasons for that, but fundamentally, these are guidelines, these are rules that are given to the nation of Israel specifically and distinctly to set them apart from all the other nations. We are grafted into Israel, and yet we remain what we are. We remain the other nations who are not bound by these constraints. And yet, we are now being made clean, which is the main reason that we're including this. Because we have to understand what is forbidden to faithful Israelites, to understand what we read, what we read last week from the New Testament, from Acts chapter 10, Peter's vision of the sheet being let down, filled with unclean animals, and the voice from heaven that calls to him and says, "Rise, Peter, kill and eat." And he says, "I don't do that. I obey the law. I don't eat anything unclean." And the voice says, "How can you call unclean what God has made clean?" Which gives us a sense of why this distinction is made, because it separates between Israel and those other nations, so that when God removes that separation and calls because this is the whole purpose of the nation of Israel, to bring all the nations in, and therefore it is precisely this sign of distinction and separation that is also the sign then of the Gentiles being brought into the church. But we'll talk about that more on day 3. So for now, God bless you all. We'll see you shortly for day 2.